In a world of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And now, your host, David Knight.
It's November 8th, 2017, 1 year after President Trump was elected, and a stunning upset of the establishment telling us who was going to win. It's one of the reasons why, as we looked at the elections last night, I held out a great deal of hope that things would turn around in Virginia. And actually, the Republican carried all of Virginia, except for the two urban areas that wiped out the votes of everybody in the rural areas. In the Washington, D.C. area and in the Virginia Beach area, those were areas that were clearly carried by the Democrat. Yet, if you look at the rest of the state, it was carried by the Republican. One of the reasons why we have electoral college in the presidential election, we do not want a couple of heavy urban areas and a couple of states to determine every one of our elections. That's a good thing about the electoral college. And that was what we had happen in the presidential election a year ago. We're beginning a 34-hour broadcast today to celebrate the election of President Trump, to celebrate your role in it, as well as the part that we played here. But it was really your support that has made this happen. And we appreciate that. We're happy to celebrate what has happened, and there's some very good signs that are coming up. We're also going to take a look at the tax reform issue, because that is an issue that is going to cost the GOP its majority if they do not get this through. We got a lot of senators who are, I'd say not a lot, but we got several Republican senators who are willing to burn down America, burn down our economy, just so they can get revenge on President Trump that they don't like. And I'm talking about Bob Corker, I'm talking about John McCain, and others. We'll take a look at who is siding on which side with the tax issue and what the tax rates are looking like, some of the other suggestions that are coming out from people. We're also going to take a look at what's going on in Saudi Arabia. There's a massive internal coup that is going on there. Who are the players? Who are they aligned with? Are they globalists? Are they friends of President Trump? What is going to happen to the U.S. economically as a result of this? And what is it going to mean for peace or war in the area? Looks like there may be some more regime change wars that are coming down the line. So we're going to take a look at that as well. So as I said, this is the one-year anniversary of President Trump winning. Last night, however, we had Democrats in New Jersey. Not unexpected that a Democrat would win there. But Democrat won in Virginia. He actually came up with the amazing statement that ad that showed a rural guy with a pickup truck and a "Don't Tread on Me" sign, as well as a Confederate flag. He actually said that was being pushed around by Russia to cost him the election. So things really haven't changed much on the Democrat side. They're still playing identity politics. They're still blaming the Russians whenever they think they may be losing. We're going to talk about what happened with the election, but let's take a look real quickly at what's going on in terms of climate change, because this is one of the areas that we have seen the biggest change in the Trump administration. He's got a lot of people in his cabinet, a lot of people that have been appointed that really aren't along with the Trump agenda. However, in the EPA, we've seen major strides taken there. And it's very important that we understand what is truly going on. I spoke on Monday to Lord Monckton, and he's going to be revealing a paper either today or tomorrow at the Karl Popper meeting. It's a commemorative meeting of the guy who did a great deal to explain the scientific method. And Lord Monckton is going to dismantle the unscientific push for climate alarmism. And there's more evidence as well. We've got NASA saying that there's evidence that volcanic activity is heating up Antarctica's ice sheet. They're concerned about ice in Antarctica. It may be that it is not man-made issues. They're saying that the mantle has been heated up. They say this amount of heat, they can't imagine why there is still ice on top of it. And this goes back to 2014. A University of Texas study found Western Antarctica was literally a hotbed for geothermal activity. There are a lot of forces that are not accounted for. Lord Monckton is going to dismantle the climate change model. He's going to take a look at it from a scientific, mathematical control theory standpoint. It doesn't hold water. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. It's November the 8th, 2017. 1 year ago, President Trump was elected in a surprise victory, surprise for the mainstream media, who've been telling us that he was losing in all of the polls. They had to eat a great deal of crow on that day. It was such a blowout that they couldn't rig the election. Not the case in Virginia. As many people were looking at this, and as I have seen individuals were contacting me from Virginia saying, well, the urban areas are holding back their returns. And I said, I've seen this every election my entire life. They wait until the last minute and the urban areas come in. It's basically like a game of poker with these guys. If it's a close election, they will rig it. And I believe that may be a factor. I don't have any evidence of that. I've just seen that type of thing happen before. It seems like a recurring pattern. The rural areas that typically go Republican will show their hand in the game of poker. And then the liberal areas, the urban areas, will wait a while. And then they will come up with a figure that beats yours as they reshuffle the cards. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe not. I don't know. But if you look at the map, you will see the electoral map. You will see that the Democrat candidate carried the Washington, D.C. area. What a surprise. And the Virginia Beach area, which is a big military area. It's not people who live in Virginia. The rest of Virginia is very conservative, but they cannot overcome those urban areas. Nevertheless, Donald Trump's election last year was such a blowout, they couldn't rig it. And I want to play for you a mashup, a clip of people's reactions, a stunned media and Democrat politicians to President Trump's election 1 year ago today. Let's run that clip.
This is the time for real wisdom. Lightning round.
If Trump wins, how about bursting into tears and screaming fuck for the next 45 minutes?
Well, America is crying tonight. I'm not sure how much of America, but a very, very significant portion. And I mean literally crying.
Everybody is crying and so upset, and it is the end of their world.
Feels like the end of the world.
We were on Lifetime last night, and I was slowly getting drunk is what happened to me.
How do we explain how this is possible?
How did this happen? Experienced politician versus racist fake gynecologist.
Get your abortions now, because we're going to be fucked, and we're going to have to live with it.
You're awake, by the way. You're not having a terrible, terrible dream. Also, you're not dead and you haven't gone to hell. This is your life now. This is our election now. This is us. This is our country.
This is a different Earth today than it was 24 hours ago. It's a different place.
All right, so that's some of the reactions that we've seen, and we're going to pop out of that because the people in Hollywood don't seem to be able to control their mouth. So we're going to pop out of that. Apologize to those of you who are listening. You know, some of the people who are very upset about this, remember, are not just the people on MSNBC, not just the people on CNN. It's the Bushes. We can take some delight in that. Over the weekend, the Bush family came out with their book. And it's a father and son book. Bush 41, Bush 43 came out with a father and son book attacking President Trump, close to the 1 year anniversary of his win. As a matter of fact, Bush Sr. admitted that he voted for Hillary. See, we've told you for a very long time there is no difference between these establishment globalist political parties. There's no difference whatsoever. Now, Junior W. said that he voted for none of the above. But we need to explain to W, because he needs a little bit of help on these issues, that there is none of the above on the ballot. Nevertheless, that's the story that he's sticking with. And this is their book. And, of course, the book is called The Last Republicans. I thought, well, I don't think that's really a very descriptive title. So I had put a poll on my website, on my Twitter account, Libertarian. And I offered some alternatives, and here are some of the results that you got. The one that won was New World Order, a bust. Coming in second was The Last Globalists instead of The Last Republicans. Maybe we could call them The Last Rhinos, but I don't think they're the last rhinos. We're going to have a lot of Republicans in name only. The third one was, it was close between 1, 2, and 3, was 9/11, it wasn't me. And then the last one was Bush's Copperfield, referring to the proclivities of Bush Sr. in the wheelchair. As one individual came back and said, there needs to be at least one misspelled title in this list. This is, after all, W that we're talking about here. So I said, well, maybe we could put in most misunderestimated presidents. But I think the best title for this book would have been Read My Book, No New Lies, A Lesson in Voodoo Politics. That's or The Last Bushes, A New Hope. Steve Bannon doubled down on this over the weekend. He called George W. Bush, called him out on his lack of leadership on immigration. He said he's a Brahmin Yankee from Yale pretending that he's a Texan. And then he went a little bit further. He said, maybe we should call them the last Whigs. because that was the party. If you remember your American history, the early days of the Republic, it was kind of the elitist establishment party. He said the Republican Party that they talked about is essentially over. He said this party is a party that is made up of workers. That's what's reflected in the election of a year ago. It's a party of workers. It's made up of American workers. It's made up of the American middle class. It's got to represent not just their values, but their interests, and it doesn't. The donors, he said, the conservative consultants, the lobbyists, and the politicians that they bought with the Republican Party don't represent their interests at all. It's quite shocking, said Bannon. He says, I think now with the internet and news services like Breitbart, Daily Caller, others that would include us here at Infowars, you're disintermediated the old kind of old think tanks of the conservative movement. And you've disintermediated the old media companies like Fox News to a large extent, which is really quite establishment. And he says the Bushes are triggered by Donald Trump. They personally, obviously detest him. As a matter of fact, in the book, George W. was saying, we don't like President Trump because we are a family that is humble, and we don't like him. And I have to say, if you have to tell people you're humble, you're not humble. But of course, again, that was W that we're talking about. The thing I thought was interesting in Bannon's assessment was he said that George W. Bush made 3 massive mistakes that took down America. He says 3 major policy initiatives that virtually destroyed the country. Number 1 was the Iraq War, $6 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. He said the second was the financial crisis that happened on his watch. And he said, but the most important part of it, and the most destructive part of it, is China. It was on his watch that they really set in motion most favored nation and getting China into the World Trade Organization. I know the Clintons pushed that. They tried to implement it, but it was Bush who looked at China. The whole Bush administration said China is going to get wealthier. It's becoming more democratic, more free market capitalist. No, that's not happening. That was a massive, massive mistake. And I would say, I would add a 4th initiative, because I think internally here in America, yes, we can talk about economic issues. And that's basically what he was talking about outside of the war. Even the war, Steve Bannon was focusing on economic issues. But I got to say, how do we ignore what happened on 9/11? How do we ignore the massive unconstitutional surveillance state, the Patriot Act? That is what should be repudiated. That, unfortunately, is not what is on the table now. But we're going to be, this is part of our 34-hour straight broadcast where we're going to be celebrating what happened 1 year ago. And we're going to be looking forward to what is coming up. Taxes are very, very important. As we see this debate going on in Congress and in the media saying, well, you know, lowering taxes doesn't really help the economy. I would ask you, what has happened to the economy over the last year? Immediately after President Trump was elected, expectations of removing regulations, of reducing taxes, caused massive economic growth. It caused consumer expectations to go up. It caused businesses to begin to invest. It caused Wall Street to create the biggest stock market bubble. As a matter of fact, it's grown so fast, many people are worried about that bubble. So we don't want to embrace that too carefully. But it has caused a massive upturn in expectations, largely based on the repeal of Obamacare and tax reductions. If they do not get that in place, we are going to see a collapse of the GOP, and that's going to have massive repercussions. But just the expectations of taxes being reduced, of regulations being reduced, has been a massive engine for our economy. How can you say that if we had real tax reduction, real regulation reduction, that we wouldn't see even greater wealth created in this country? Stay with us. We'll be right back. Part of our 34-hour broadcast beginning right now. I'm David Knight. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's November the 8th, 2017. It was November the 8th, 2016 that President Trump became president. That he confounded and frustrated people. We got a great clip coming up from fake Jake Tapper at CNN talking about the Hillary Clinton campaign as we, on election night, we knew that was what was going on. We knew that Donna Brazile at CNN was feeding her debate questions. We have now had Donna Brazile and insiders in the DNC reveal that the entire DNC was bought by Hillary Clinton, bought out the debt that Barack Obama had left them saddled with, and said, you will report to us. You will report to the Hillary for President campaign, and we will have final review over everything that happens. That was the way that they had moved in with the massive amounts of cash that Hillary had with the many deals that she had and Bill had been doing over the last couple of decades. You know, selling arms secrets to China. That happened way before the Russian uranium deal. They may have made a lot more money out of that deal than they did out of the uranium one deal to Russia. But we're going to have reactions of people on election night. We're also going to be talking about what's going on in Saudi Arabia. Very important. Wasn't able to get to it for the last couple of days because of the shooting and the vital information about that. And, of course, there are a couple of updates with that, as well as updates on the gun control angle that is now being pursued. Isn't it interesting that even though this is a much smaller shooting in scale in terms of number of lives lost, isn't it interesting that they are pushing so much harder now with this shooting than they did with the one in Las Vegas? Is it that the Las Vegas thing just was so fishy that they felt like that was going to expose something about them? I still have a great deal of questions and misgivings about the Vegas shooting, about what the official story is. And I think they worked very hard to cover up every aspect of that. That thing was one of the most suspect events that we have had in our history in terms of my lifetime. And they shied back from that. They didn't push any gun control legislation. And many liberals are saying, where's our bump stock ban? We don't have a bump stock ban. Massachusetts has pushed one, but the feds have pushed back against that. And you would expect that in Massachusetts anyway. Nevertheless, the feds pulled back. The Democrats at the federal level pulled back on this thing. And they really didn't push anything. This is, without a doubt, a genuine event here in Texas, and I think that's why they're pushing so hard now. They don't want any scrutiny of what happened in Vegas. And they don't, and here's the other thing, folks. This is something that was revealed by Mark Collins, former pastor. He played George Washington in Revelation the movie because he is a spitting image of George Washington. He also goes around and educates kids dressed as George Washington. He educates them on American history and on the Republic, and he recreated that for the movie Revelation the movie. You can find that at their website. We carry that here at Infowars store. But Mark Collins was a pastor there at that church for, I think, about a year and a half, I believe. But he went there to help the people. And he told us on Monday something that mainstream media has not pushed. We haven't even really pushed it sufficiently here at Infowars, I don't think. And that is that the shooter, many people have talked about the fact that he's an RA instructor, but the shooter was using an AR-15. We have full-page, multi-page articles done by NPR, done by USA Today, done by CNN, going down and talking about what a fearful military weapon this is and how nobody should ever own one. Well, the hero who stopped this owned one. Would you want to hamstring him? You want him to go out there with a flintlock musket when the criminals will still be able to get an AR-15? And I'm not being facetious. I mean, we got a lot of people like Michael Moore. You don't need, the Second Amendment was written when people had muzzle-loading muskets. We don't need Second Amendment this time of day. We got our weapons are too dangerous. They're military style. And we've actually got President Trump's Pentagon nominee saying that it's insane that civilians can buy assault rifles. This is Dr. Dean L. Winslow, the nominee to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, said that. Can you believe that? This is the problem in a big bureaucracy like that. I don't know who's making the appointments for President Trump, but even though President Trump has had a lot of accomplishments, and we're going to talk about some of those here, that's in spite of the people that have been appointed. The only person that he's put in that is worth a darn is the EPA administrator. He is on target, so much so that he's got to have 24/7 security protection. But the only way that we get 24/7 security protection is if we provide our own weapon and know how to use it. And that's what we're going to continue to do here in America. All right, this is the beginning of our 34-hour broadcast here. It's America's rebirth, America's renaissance that we're celebrating today. And you had a big role in this. Your support of the products that we sell here at Infowars is really what makes this possible. And as I'm looking at this sheet and the discounts that we have here, I'm seeing one product after the other, 50% off. And I said yesterday after we saw that shameful display on Twitter where you had a Democrat congressman named Quigley talking to a Twitter executive Quisling. and telling him, I just saw Infowars trending on Twitter. And it was an article where we were quoting what an imam had said about neglect by Mayor de Blasio. Said, I told him many times that there were radical mosques here and he needed to do something about it, and he didn't do anything about it. And of course, that was coming up right as there was an election yesterday in New York City. De Blasio won, but this Democrat was very, very angry that this story, where we simply reported what the imam had said publicly put out on Twitter. He was so upset that that article was trending on Twitter. And he asked the Twitter executive, why is that happening? Well, we shut that down. We saw that, we shut that down. Well, why didn't you do it faster? Can we talk about this later, Senator, when we're in private? I don't really want to go into all this stuff here. You know, you've embarrassed me enough to talk about censorship, but it also came out that they shut down 50% of the tweets, and there were over 500,000 of those, about hashtag DNC leaks. Twitter working with Hillary Clinton to make sure that you don't see what was leaked, that you merely focus on the made-up narrative that it was Russians who broke in and stole all that stuff. And I talked about that yesterday. But as I said, when they delete 50% of the tweets about DNC leaks, I said, well, we ought to call this the DNC leak special, or the Stop Twitter special. And we've got a whole bunch of things that are 50% off, just like they took 50% of your tweets about the DNC leaks away. So here's some of the things we have on special. Super Male Vitality, 50% off with free shipping. Super Female Vitality, 50% off with free shipping as well. Biome Defense 50, 50% off with free shipping. Again, that Biome Defense 50 is because of the number of types of strains that we have in there of probiotics. All apparel, 50% off with free shipping. Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix, 50% off with free shipping. Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, 50% off with free shipping. Super Blue Fluoride-Free Mouthwash, 50% off with free shipping. And DNA Force is back in stock, 25% off with free shipping. Now, it's not as deeply discounted, but that is a big dollar discount. That's a very expensive product to make. And again, you can think of it as the number of emails, the number of tweets that Twitter deleted. They deleted and tweeted. They deleted 25% of the tweets about Podesta's emails. So if you want to fight censorship, if you want to take back this country, if you want to have more victories like we did 1 year ago, stand with us, and we appreciate that. That's why we have discounted these products that deeply. 50% off, just like Twitter censors your tweets. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. It was a year ago that President Trump was elected. This is the beginning of our 34-hour broadcast to celebrate that. And I want to give you an example of how things might have been different if Hillary Clinton had won. And it's important to understand the important victories that we've had in this last year. Even though we've had an establishment GOP largely block President Trump, reversing themselves to keep Obamacare, and now we've got some suicidal senators. And actually, they're not suicidal. I guess that Bob Corker's seeing the handwriting on the wall. He knows he can't get elected. John McCain is dying. But they're going to pull down the temple with them. They want to burn down America by stopping any kind of substantive tax reform. And they're going to do that. And they're going to do it just to get even with President Trump, just to stop this movement, just to try to damage it. And that's what we've already seen with Obamacare. But one of the places where they haven't been able to stop the Trump agenda is on the environment. We've had massive improvements there because we have a great EPA administrator, and Scott Pruitt. And here's an article from Breitbart, James Dollingpole, talking about how Trump has been vindicated. Now, even the United Nations confirms that the Paris Climate Accord was a complete waste. And understand, this is coming as I look through and survey the media. I see these pictures on various establishment mainstream media sites, and they show President Trump, and they've got like the world on fire behind him. That's the image that they're showing, and saying that the United States is now the only country that's not in the climate Paris Accord. So let's talk about what the UN is saying about this. The UN admits that it was totally useless to do anything about this. This is the UN Environment Committee admits that its latest emissions shortfall report Even when you add up all the CO2 reduction pledges made by all the signatory nations at Paris, they say, it still comes to only 1/3. Think about 1/3. 1/3 of what is supposedly necessary to stop the world by warming more than 2 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. Okay, so what they're saying is this is only 1/3 of what we need according to our models. Now, I had Lord Monckton on Monday. He talked about how he was going to be revealing his analysis of the failed model at the Karl Popper meeting. And of course, Karl Popper was a guy who formulated, in very precise terms, a scientific method. And Lord Monckton is a mathematician. He's worked with other people who are engineers and scientists who understand control feedback theory. They have taken a look at this model, and they have said this is fundamentally flawed. And they're going to make their presentation. They're going to go right after this foundation of climate mythology that they're so concerned about. That was the justification for the Paris Climate Accord. And yet, nevertheless, all the pledges that everybody's come together with would only be 1/3 of what their model says is necessary. And so what they're saying is we still find ourselves in a situation where we're not doing nearly enough. You know, there will never be enough. They will always want more. And, of course, they can always do that because other than somebody like Lord Monckton coming in and pointing out how they got the science wrong, how they got the math wrong on this, if you will, okay, for the most part, they can get away with this because they appeal to authority. They appeal to consensus. Those are not how you do science. That's why he's presenting this at the Karl Popper convention, because he's talking about the scientific method. Science is not determined by consensus, not even amongst the most established scientists. We have seen over and over again in history how scientific consensus by all the best scientists in the world were wrong. I'll give you one example. The Wright brothers versus Langley, the guy they named Langley Air Force Base after, where the CIA is now. Okay, Langley was, I think he was involved with the Smithsonian. I think he was head of the Smithsonian, but he was one of the most respected scientists in the world, certainly one of the most respected in America. He was trying to create a flying airplane. He was unable to do it. Why? Because he was going with the tables that had been created by the rest of the scientific consensus, the scientific establishment. They'd come up with lift and drag tables that were wrong. And the Wright brothers said, this doesn't quite look like it's right. And so they went back and they did their own measurements. And they got it right because they went back and did the science themselves. They didn't rely on faulty work from somebody else. They began at the very beginning. And so here you've got a guy who is in charge of all these different scientific establishments. He's got all these scientific degrees, and a couple of homeschool bicycle builders went back to the very beginning and did real science, and they made the first flying machine. And so you cannot go through, when they come up with these climate models, these are projecting what the climate is going to be decades or centuries from now. And so you can't really test their models, but you can examine their assumptions. And so that's what Lord Monckton is going to do. But let's get back to the Paris Climate Change Agreement, the Paris Climate Treaty or Agreement or whatever. Okay, as Dellingpole points out, another way to look at it is that President Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Accord is now fully vindicated. Had the agreement been ratified, and here's the important point about this, it was absolutely irrelevant. And many people who believed that we're getting global warming from CO2, many of those people were saying this isn't going to do anything. And now they're still saying that. But here's what it would have done. It would have handed countries like China and India a huge competitive advantage over the American economy. That's what it would have done. We know that would have happened. Many people are saying, and they're now still saying, this isn't going to make any difference for our climate models. The climate alarmists are saying that. But we knew what it was going to do, and this was really what its true purpose was. Its true purpose was to manage our economy, to ruin our economy. The true purpose was for the globalists to hand more economic power to China and to India, as they have been doing for the last several decades. That's what President Trump stopped. So whether or not you agree with man-made global warming based on CO2 increasing, and of course CO2 has gone up rapidly in the last few years, and yet we see that ocean temperatures are cooling. Why is that happening? That's because there is no correlation there. Nevertheless, but even as the UN now admits, it would have made no discernible difference to the alleged problem of global warming. So the point was to destroy our economy, to take over our economy and turn it to give it to China and to India. They were going to be given a pass to continue to build very dirty coal plants and not even begin to cap this for decades. We're going to have to cap and immediately start reducing our economy. But let's talk about the oceans. I mentioned this at the top of the hour, but there's another report here from Daily Caller. NASA has more evidence that volcanic activity is heating up Antarctica's ice sheet. Ancient underground streams of heated rock called a mantle plume might be the explanation for the instability of Antarctica's western ice sheet. And this is coming from NASA. One of the scientists at NASA said, "Whoa, I thought it was crazy. I didn't see how we could have that amount of heat and still even have ice on top of it." Oh, well, maybe it's because the oceans are cooling, and that is mitigating this somewhat. And again, in the report, they point out that in 2014, a University of Texas study found Western Antarctica was a literal hotbed for geothermal activity. They said large areas of the base of the Thwaites Glacier are actively melting in response to geothermal flux consistent with a rift-associated magma migration and volcanism. Here's what that translates to. Not man-made. You understand? There's heat there, and we're seeing some melting. Nevertheless, we're seeing increased ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic area because of other factors. And so these scientists are astonished because they're not seeing an increase in temperature that is correlated to CO2. They're not seeing, even though there's massive geothermal activity under Antarctica, they're not seeing the whole thing melt down. What is going wrong? Well, fortunately, we have been saved from this alarmism. We've been saved from this junk science. And one of the reasons for that is President Trump and his appointment at EPA. That's one of the things that happened a year ago, November 8th, 2016. This is our 34-hour broadcast. I'm David Knight, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight on this November 8th, 2017, 1 year after President Trump was elected, and we're having a 34-hour broadcast. We're calling it American Rebirth and Renaissance. This is just the beginning. We'll have live coverage for 34 hours. Just to remind you of some of the sales that we have along with this, and free shipping on these sales as well. We have Super Male Vitality, 50% off with free shipping. Super Female Vitality, also 50% off with free shipping. Biome Defense 50, that's our probiotic formula. That is 50% off with free shipping. All apparel, 50% off with free shipping. Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix, 50% off with free shipping. Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, 50% off with free shipping. Super Blue fluoride-free mouthwash, 50% off with free shipping. And DNA Force, back in stock now, 25% off with free shipping. And again, even though that's one item that is not 50% off, that is a big discount. That's a very expensive item to produce. It takes us a long time to do it, so we frequently do run out of it. So right now, it is in stock, and you can get it for 25% off. I want to go back and take a look as we're looking at the reaction of the media to President Trump's victory a year ago. It's what the Germans call Schadenfreude, basically a dark joy in the suffering of other people. and we can take some joy in that. They're celebrating today. They had a little bit of victories yesterday. Of course, they won in some Democrat areas like New Jersey and Virginia. There was some hope, even though the Republican had not been leading in the polls. They had tightened in recent weeks, and there was some hope that the candidate for governor there would win. But as Donald Trump pointed out in his tweet today, he said, Ed Gillespie, the Republican candidate, worked hard, but he did not embrace me or what I stand for. Don't forget, he said, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, we will continue to win, even bigger than before. And I have to say, makes it all the more important that we have tax reform. We're going to talk about what the state of tax reform is right now in the Senate and in the House, the chances for passage, what the plan actually means for different people in different states at different income levels. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of the tax reform because this is a vital issue. It is a vital issue, not only for Trump, the Trump agenda, and moving forward with the GOP, because there's, as I mentioned before, many people like Bob Corker and John McCain who just want to burn it down. They don't care. Just like the Bushes, they hate President Trump. Read their book, No New Lies. Just the same old lies that they were telling us all the time. They want to see Trump fail, and they will burn down our economy in order to do it. And as we have all of these talking points from the Democrats who somehow have now discovered something called a deficit and an accumulated debt. They were running annual deficits that were so large they were adding $1 trillion a year to the debt, and yet they have just now discovered it. They have just now discovered fiscal responsibility, and they're lecturing us that we can't have tax cuts because we're spending too much money. Well, there's a solution for that, and that is to cut taxes and cut the spending even more. One of the things that they could cut, and that's one of the plans that people are putting out there, Obamacare taxes are gigantic. It is a gigantic tax scheme. To that extent, the Social Security, the Supreme Court was correct. It was an unconstitutional mandate to buy a product from a private company, and it should not have been allowed because of that. But it was also a giant tax. Obamacare should have been called Obama tax. It certainly wasn't affordable health care. It wasn't health care at all. It was health insurance that they're providing for people. And you have to understand the difference between health insurance and health care. That those two do not necessarily track together. But it was a massive tax. They added 17,000 different new IRS agents to administer this tax. It is a tremendous financial burden, and that needs to be removed. It drove up the cost of health care to put taxes on health insurance. It drove up the cost of health care to put taxes on medical devices. That's just common sense. That doesn't make anything more affordable to tax it unless you're looking at some kind of inverted socialist logic. But that's an important thing that has to be done with taxes. But as we look at this and as we look at the reactions of people, I want to go back to Fake Jake of CNN, the guy who was telling us after the New York City terrorist attack that was not done with a gun. It was done with a vehicle. And he was talking about how Allahu Akbar, and he lied to us about what that truly means. It does not mean God is great. It means Allah is greater than your God. He's greater than your culture. He's greater than your rule of law, your political system, because Islam is not just a religion. It is a political system. So it means all of those things, but it does not mean God is great. Doesn't mean that we worship the same God. They'll be the first ones to deny that. But he was telling us that. And then as people pushed back on that, he said, this all started with Infowars, and now Fox News has become like those nut jobs at Infowars. And I said, well, actually, you become like the Onion. And they later did with the shooting that happened on Sunday, putting out the idea that Sam Hyde, this internet meme, and they let a senator put that out. They left it out there for quite some time. They put that out there, and I said, see, that's what happens when you rely on official sources and you don't check anything because you're in bed with these people politically. Here's an example of how Jake Tapper was politically in bed with the Hillary Clinton campaign.
The key states that we really need, that Hillary Clinton really needs to maintain, let's just put this on the board. We need to make, Hillary Clinton needs to keep Pennsylvania, and she needs to keep New Hampshire.
Yeah, no bias there. No bias there from Fake Jake. We need to do this, and we need to do that. And we already gave her the questions to the debate that was coming up. So we did everything we could to help her. And we're still failing. We just can't get this through. Let's play the clip of Rachel Maddow, clip number 10. This is her nuclear meltdown as she realized that her dream of having Hillary Clinton in, because, nobody liked anything about Hillary Clinton except the fact that she was a woman. And it just wasn't enough. There are plenty of women who are qualified to be president. She is not one of them. Here's Rachel Maddow's meltdown.
Let me be the 4,000th person in your personal life to tell you that this is a landmark moment in political history that we're in right now. There are protests in the streets tonight, big ones. This was just before our show went on the air tonight. This is out my window in my office. Huge, loud protest against Donald Trump being elected president went by. This is out my window from my office. Just
not my president. Yeah. No, he is your president
now in front of Trump Tower. This is part part of how you know you're in America, right? Freedom of assembly. Freedom of assembly, freedom to peacefully protest an election outcome you don't like. And honestly, we never before have made the peaceful transition of power to someone who has such radical and frankly negative views of all of those other unromantic but crucial everyday foundational elements of our civic life. The things that make us who we are as a country, the things that make us a free republic. What he wants to do with that power is destroy a lot of the other foundational civic things that make us who we are as a country. I mean, our republic is not just our system of democracy. It's all of these other things that we need too. And so what do? We have a free press in this country. We don't have state media, right? We don't have state censorship on any sort of broad scale. We have a free and independent press that does what it wants, says what it wants, asks whatever questions it wants. We act to protect the other aspects of our life as a nation that we maybe used to take for granted, but that now really overtly and presently and acutely require protection.
We have to protect the state media.
Bad stuff happens.
People need to be protected against tweets.
Even potential end of the world stuff. Sometimes it does happen. Sometimes it turns out to be your generation, your workplace, your country. There are doomsday plans going into action all over this country right now. It's the brink of nuclear war. It's like worth a shot, right? If all else fails, why not try that?
Yeah, well, they were going to try that, the Antifa people, but then it turned into like an anti-fail. It was kind of a total failure of the socialists. And well, she talks about the fact that we don't have state media. Come on, let's understand the massive subsidies of mainstream media. Let's understand that there are things that are directly subsidized like NPR. Let's understand the long-term control of the mainstream media, the old establishment, CBS, ABC, NBC. Understand Operation Mockingbird. Understand how they were fed information. Do you think it was coincidence that those guys always talked about exactly the same topics in their half-hour news show? And they all gave you exactly the same angle? No, we do have a free press today. And that's why they're trying to shut it down. The free press is getting to people, and you are sharing articles, and you're educating yourself, and they want to stop that. That's why they want even greater control over the rope-a-dope structures that they put in social media like Twitter, like YouTube and Google and others, Facebook. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight.